And it's time to call to the floor His Excellency, the President of Montenegro. Please, the floor is yours, Your Excellency.
Well, it is really a great pleasure to be today here in Greece and be part of this great Delphi Economic Forum. So, first of all, dear Chairman of the Forum, thank you for inviting me. Dear President of the Hellenic Republic, dear President of Slovenia, ladies and gentlemen, this is my second time to speak at the forum. The previous time I spoke was in 2021, when the forum was organized in Athens due to the pandemic, and I spoke as an economy minister back then. So it's good to be back in my new role as the president of Montenegro, and in the time with no pandemic. So now, 3 years after, I do want to speak about the change that happened in Montenegro over the last few years. And this is the story of political transformation of this smallest, and we do like to think the most beautiful country of the Balkans. This is also a story of our economic convergence and the story of our vision to become the next member of the European Union. And as many places across the globe have reversed in their democratic development, I do believe that Montenegro has made a decisive step towards a more mature and consolidated state of our democracy. Montenegro has become an internationally recognized country following the Great Congress of Berlin in 1878. And from its international recognition until the World War I, the country was ruled by the royal family of Montenegro. Then between the two wars, the country became the part of the Kingdom of Yugoslavia, which was ruled by the royal family of Serbia. After the World War II, the communists took power all the way until the fall of the Berlin Wall. And following the fall of the Berlin Wall until 2020, the country was ruled by one political party, which was stemming from the Communist Party of Yugoslavia. So over the last 150 years of our proud and great history, the country was basically ruled by 4 regimes. And in essence, all of them had one thing in common, which was more or less an authoritarian mode of rule. So despite the fact that we are a nation with a long statehood history, which, by the way, as a digression, also gave a great hero of the Greek War of Independence, the General Vaso Mavrovouniotis, we have changed the government for the first time as a result of the elections only in 2020. And so this year was really the time when Montenegro entered into the new stage of our democratic development, the one that many other countries throughout the region of Central and Eastern Europe perhaps went through the early 90s. And this is also when the true accountability came into our politics as a result of the fear of losing elections. Because it is the fear of losing elections which brings accountability to the politics. Ever since the country had already had 3 governments in place, while the completion of the transition of power came with the presidential elections of the last year when I became the president. And elections in Montenegro are not anymore the question of life and death, but just a regular exercise of the people's will, which, as we all know, is not really the case in many places around the globe. So this is indeed a story of a political transformation of our small but proud nation. On top of it, there has been an institutional development. And of course, the European Union and the EU accession process has played a major role as an external anchor for making sure that the reform agenda persists. Ultimately, what is important is to bring back the trust of the normal people to the institutions, to the judiciary, to the court system, because losing the trust of the people is very easy. Building back the trust of the people in the system is hell of a job. But I'm very optimistic that our generation perhaps is now going to be able to complete the job that the generation of my parents and grandparents was not able to do. For me, the day when I am no longer the president is just going to be a normal day. And I think that having more and more politicians, generally in the Balkans, with alternatives outside of the politics, is always going to be good for democracy and the politics of this region, which, as Churchill always said, was able to produce more history than it was able to consume. 2020 was economically a terrible year. A tourism-driven economy, as it is the one of Montenegro, very similar to the one of Greece, was hit hard. The economic decline was 15%. This is when I became an economy minister, and was indeed a difficult job. But I think this is where my experience, the one from the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, got to play a major role. Before I joined the Montenegrin politics, I was covering a range of different countries, all the way from the Central Asia to the Arab world. And I was able to see what are the policies that make sense and that work to the benefit of the people, and what are those that do not do the job. Together with my colleague, the finance minister, who is, by the way, now the current prime minister of Montenegro, we planned a number of structural reforms, as we wanted to speed up the process of economic convergence of Montenegro with the rest of the European continent. And I think that we have accomplished this. So today, more or less, the country is at about 60% of GDP per capita in relationship to the average of the EU. And I think as a small system, we have the biggest possibility to have a speedy economic convergence further on. On the EU agenda, Montenegro became a candidate country in 2010. So for the last 11 years, since 2012, we have been negotiating with the European Union, and we are always considered to be a front runner. But the aim is really to stop front running, to come to an end of this process. out of 10 candidate countries that currently exist, Montenegro is economically the most advanced, has been using the euro since 2001, is the country which is fully aligning its foreign and security policy with the one of the EU, and finally, as a new generation of politicians who truly don't remember the ugly 90s and the wars of former Yugoslavia in the helm of the country. Our membership in NATO is also very important. Montenegro has been a NATO member since 2017, thus strengthening the stability of this very complex part of Europe. So now there is a new momentum in Montenegro. But we also believe that there is a new momentum in Brussels as well, which unfortunately resulted from the Russian aggression on Ukraine. There was a wake-up call in Brussels, a wake-up call in many other capitals of the member states, who were before reluctant, conservative about enlargement. But I think that the wake-up call happened because there is now an understanding that the enlargement of the EU is also about the security of the European continent. So now our goal is to become a new member state of the European Union, as we like to say, the 28th member state in 2028. This is also well understood by Brussels, and I think this is a unique momentum where both Montenegro as well as the EU is hoping to have a successful story, a positive story, which can finally bring the light at the end of the tunnel when it comes to enlargement. Because the last country that became the part of the EU was Croatia more than 10 years ago. And this is where I think that the story of Montenegro and its accession into the EU is a story much bigger than Montenegro itself, because it would really provide this positive signal and a spillover effect to the rest of the region, to those countries that are perhaps a bit more complicated than Montenegro at this stage, and send a signal that reforms pay off, that the new political culture pays off, that the shared values pay off. So when I ask myself in the mornings why I do this job, and by the way, it's a valid question, sometimes also asked by my wife, it is really the vision to bring the country into the EU, because it's a story bigger than Montenegro. I think it is important to have friends on this road, and I do want to use this opportunity to thank the Hellenic Republic, the President, and the Prime Minister for supporting our country on this path. Evharisto Parapoli.